Marcus had it all. Or at least that's what everyone thought. A high-paying career, a beautiful home, a loving wife, and a 3-year-old son who adored him. Yet, despite all the markers of success, he felt a constant emptiness gnawing at him. Every bonus, every promotion, every shiny new purchase only deepened the quiet ache of inadequacy. He compared himself to peers, scrolled through social media with envy, and wondered if he would ever feel truly satisfied. The harder he chased, the more distant happiness seemed. In this story, you'll follow Marcus's journey from relentless pursuit and burnout to reflection, presence, and finally discovering what enough really means. You'll witness his failures, his small victories, and the subtle wisdom he learns along the way, lessons that could change the way you think about success, ambition, and fulfillment. Listen all the way to the end to see how Marcus transforms his life, reconnects with his family, and finds contentment without giving up ambition, because sometimes letting go of the wrong things is the only way to finally have everything that matters.
Marcus woke to the soft light filtering through the blinds, but his mind was already racing. The alarm had barely sounded, and his thoughts were a flurry of emails, client calls, and the latest project deadlines. At 30, he had everything he thought he wanted: a lucrative career, a beautiful home in the city, a wife who managed the household, and a 3-year-old son whose laughter could melt the hardest of days. Yet, despite all of this, there was a weight he carried that no salary, bonus, or promotion could lift. It was a quiet pressure, a sense that he was always behind, always measuring himself against someone else, always striving for the next milestone. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee, brewed early by his wife, as she moved quietly preparing breakfast. Marcus watched her for a moment, noticing the small lines of fatigue that had appeared over the past few months. She was always present for their son, always managing the home with care. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was failing somehow, failing to be enough, earning enough, achieving enough. At work, Marcus's days were a relentless rhythm of meetings, presentations, and decisions. He thrived on ambition, yet it never felt like enough. A colleague got a better deal, a friend received recognition he didn't get, a peer's social media post gleamed with achievement he hadn't reached. He tried to mask it, to smile, to focus on his own tasks, but the comparison crept in, subtle and persistent. Every promotion brought a fleeting sense of satisfaction, quickly replaced with new responsibilities, longer hours, and the creeping sense that he still wasn't enough. The new car he bought last month gleamed in the driveway, a symbol of his success. But even that, he realized, had not brought contentment. He admired it, yes, but it didn't soothe the gnawing pressure inside. Evenings were no different. The dinner table was set, the baby giggling in his high chair, his wife smiling at him with warmth and patience, and yet Marcus often found himself distracted, checking his phone, reviewing emails, mentally preparing for the next day's demands. He wanted to be present, to enjoy these moments with his family, but his mind pulled him elsewhere. It was during these moments, watching his son reach for a toy or laugh at something simple, that the first cracks appeared. He noticed the subtle distance between what he desired, connection, joy, peace, and what he was experiencing. It was not dramatic, not catastrophic, but it was persistent, the quiet tug of dissatisfaction. Marcus's weekends were no refuge. A new house, newly furnished rooms, and a car parked in the driveway were supposed to signify achievement. But when he stood back and looked at it all, he felt a strange hollowness. Friends came over, praising the upgrades, commenting on his success, but their words rang hollow. The envy he had once felt toward peers was now mirrored back in his own eyes. He had chased what others seemed to value, yet the satisfaction it promised never arrived. It wasn't that he lacked accomplishment. He had plenty. It was the sense that the more he chased, the further happiness seemed to recede. He realized he had built a life that looked perfect to the outside world, but was subtly fraying on the inside.
At work, Marcus had always believed that success was measurable. Bonuses, promotions, awards, and status were the currency he understood. Yet a recent project had shaken this belief. A client, despite his meticulous preparation, rejected his proposal. It wasn't catastrophic, not by any standard, but it forced him to confront a truth he had long ignored. External recognition and achievement were fragile. They could be taken away or rendered meaningless in an instant. Driving home that evening, he noticed the traffic, the city lights reflecting on the glass buildings, and a subtle tension in his chest. He wanted to scream, to let go of the constant striving, but the habits of ambition ran deep. He reminded himself of his goals: a bigger house, the best schools for his son, financial freedom. And yet, the satisfaction he imagined those things would bring remained elusive. At home, his wife greeted him with warmth, but he realized he hadn't truly been present in the last conversation they had. He had nodded and smiled while mentally running through his to-do list, failing to acknowledge the effort and love she poured into their home. He saw the subtle frustration in her eyes. Not anger, just a quiet, patient acknowledgement that he was distracted. That night, as Marcus lay in bed, he reflected on his day. He could list a dozen achievements, yet he felt drained, disconnected, and restless. His son stirred in his sleep beside him, and for a fleeting moment, he imagined what it would feel like to simply be present, to watch, listen, and engage fully without the constant pull of ambition. The following week brought another milestone: a promotion to a senior managerial role. Colleagues congratulated him, friends sent messages, and the bonuses arrived. He should have felt triumph. Yet, as he looked at the figures in his bank account, the letters on his new title, and the shiny new office space, the emptiness lingered. He realized that he had long equated success with achievement, yet the metrics he chased never captured satisfaction. This awareness was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but it planted a seed. The seed that perhaps, just perhaps, something beyond status, money, and recognition might matter more than he had allowed himself to admit. On the weekend, he took a rare walk with his son in the park. The air was crisp, the sunlight warm on their faces. His son ran ahead, laughter spilling through the trees. He watched, momentarily unburdened by emails, projects, or comparisons. The simplicity of the moment struck him, a fleeting sense of joy and presence he hadn't felt in months. Yet even in this joy, he felt the pull of restlessness. He thought of the pending project, the car payment, the house renovation. The tug of ambition, of comparison, of societal expectation was relentless. The question began to form, quietly, persistently: what is enough? Even at dinner that night, Marcus found himself caught between engagement and distraction. His wife spoke of her day, of the small triumphs and struggles, while he nodded, listening only partially. He recognized the irony. He had built a life to provide comfort, security, and happiness for his family, yet he struggled to inhabit it fully. He noticed the way his son's small hands reached for the food, the way his wife's eyes softened when she spoke to him, and felt a pang of guilt for missing these moments while chasing goals that seemed to shift constantly. Over the next several days, small cracks began to widen in Marcus's perception of success. At work, his team noticed his impatience and distraction. Colleagues commented subtly on his stress. At home, the subtle tension with his wife grew, though neither spoke directly about it. His body carried the strain: tight shoulders, headaches, restless nights. He realized that the life he had meticulously crafted to achieve more was exacting a price he hadn't anticipated. Money, possessions, status, they had not delivered the inner satisfaction he expected. Instead, they had exposed a quiet emptiness, a longing that no bonus, new car, or promotion could fill. Late one night, Marcus sat on the balcony overlooking the city. Lights shimmered in the distance.
The hum of traffic was a constant backdrop. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to pause fully, not thinking of the next task, the next milestone, or the next comparison. He simply breathed, observed, and reflected. A thought emerged quietly. Perhaps the pursuit itself, unchecked and relentless, was the source of dissatisfaction. Perhaps he had been looking for contentment in the wrong places, measuring worth by standards that were not his own, and ignoring what truly mattered: presence, connection, and clarity.
Marcus's life, which had once seemed like a seamless balance of career, family, and ambition, began to feel increasingly precarious. The promotion he had earned a few weeks ago brought prestige and a higher salary, yet it also ushered in longer hours, grueling deadlines, and unrelenting pressure. At first, he told himself it was temporary, a necessary investment for a future where he would finally feel satisfaction. But the days blurred into nights, and nights into restless mornings. The gentle laughter of his son, which had once filled him with warmth, now competed with mental calculations of project deadlines and client expectations. His wife noticed the subtle shift. Her patience, though steady, carried an unspoken concern. She did not complain, she simply watched, offering support where she could, while Marcus drifted further into work. Social events only intensified the pressure. Friends and colleagues compared achievements effortlessly, sharing milestones on social media, boasting about bonuses, trips, and new acquisitions. Marcus felt a gnawing dissatisfaction as he scrolled through the carefully curated highlights of others' lives. Each post became a reminder that no matter what he had achieved, someone else had more, did better, or appeared happier. He bought the larger house, the luxury car, the high-end gadgets, all symbols of success, but each acquisition brought a brief thrill that dissolved almost immediately. The excitement was fleeting, leaving the same hollow feeling behind. Marcus began to question whether the pursuit of more was worth the increasing toll on his health and relationships. At work, his team started noticing the change. Marcus was sharper, faster, and more demanding than ever, but he was also more irritable. Small mistakes that once would have been trivial now triggered frustration. Colleagues tiptoed around him, wary of his mood swings. Marcus realized, reluctantly, that his drive for perfection had begun to alienate those around him. One afternoon, a key project he had been managing failed to meet expectations. Not disastrously, but enough to feel like a personal defeat. Marcus's heart sunk. He had spent weeks orchestrating every detail, yet the outcome was out of his control. He felt a wave of helplessness he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. It was a small crisis, but its impact rippled through his sense of competence and control. Returning home that evening, Marcus noticed the tension in the air. His wife was quiet, their son fussing in the high chair. He realized he had missed the first steps his son took that day, missing yet another small but profound moment of life he could never reclaim. The thought hit him hard. These were the moments that mattered, fleeting and irreplaceable, yet he had been too absorbed in chasing external markers of success to notice. He sank into his chair, feeling a mix of guilt, frustration, and fatigue. It was not anger at his wife or child, but at himself, at the relentless compulsion to achieve more, to do more, to be more in the eyes of the world. The realization was uncomfortable, but it was the first spark of self-awareness he had felt in months. The following week, Marcus experienced another jolt, a minor health scare. Tightness in his chest during a late-night work session sent him to the emergency room. The doctor's reassurances were calm and professional, Yet the warning was clear. He was pushing himself too hard, neglecting rest, and risking more than he had realized. As he sat in the hospital waiting room, he thought of his son's smile, his wife's quiet support, and the life he had built. The panic and adrenaline of work seemed suddenly distant, less important. He began to understand dimly, but unmistakably, that his definition of success had been incomplete. It was focused entirely on external markers, money, possessions, status, while neglecting the internal measures of health, connection, and contentment.
At home, he tried to reconnect with his family, but old patterns persisted. During dinner, his mind wandered to spreadsheets, meetings, and pending deadlines. His wife's patience began to waver subtly, not in anger, but in quiet resignation. She expressed concern about his fatigue and absence, but Marcus deflected, promising he would slow down soon, though he didn't know when or how. Even his son noticed. The little boy reached for him during playtime, but Marcus's attention was fractured, half focused on his phone, half on the game. The dissonance between his intentions and actions gnawed at him. He realized that chasing more had inadvertently made him absent from the life he valued most. In the office, a colleague approached with candid advice. "Marcus, you're brilliant, but you're burning out. You're not living the life you're building." The words stung because they were true. Marcus had always believed that relentless effort was the path to fulfillment, yet now he saw cracks in the foundation. The pursuit of external achievement had begun to erode his internal stability, and he had no blueprint for how to stop the downward spiral. Small signs accumulated: missed bedtime routines with his son, arguments with his wife about trivial matters that escalated due to fatigue, stress-related headaches. Even moments of joy felt fleeting, overshadowed by the next goal, the next comparison, the next expectation. Marcus was beginning to feel the cumulative cost of chasing more. A pivotal moment came on a rainy evening. Driving home from the office late, he saw a father in the park playing with his child, laughing and carefree. Marcus's chest tightened. He realized that he had not experienced such simple, unhurried joy in months. His son was at home waiting for his attention, yet he had missed it again, caught in the endless pursuit of the next achievement. That night he could not sleep. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about the week, the month, the years of constant striving. For the first time, he asked himself a question he had avoided for too long. What is enough? Marcus began small experiments. He left work a little earlier, paused to listen to his son's stories, genuinely engaged with his wife in conversation, and observed the city around him during his commute. The moments were brief, but their impact was profound. He began to notice that joy, presence, and satisfaction were not dependent on external accumulation. They were cultivated internally, through awareness and attention. Yet change was not easy. Ambition remained a constant tug. Emails waited unanswered, deadlines loomed. The pull of comparison and societal expectation was relentless. Each choice to slow down required conscious effort, deliberate focus, and subtle negotiation with his own habits. At the office, a project that would have once consumed him entirely became a test of new discipline. He approached it deliberately, focusing on what he could control: his effort, communication, and preparation, while letting go of outcomes beyond his influence. The results were mixed, but he felt something he hadn't felt in months: calm, grounded satisfaction with his actions rather than obsession over results. He returned home that evening to a quiet house. His wife was reading in the living room, his son sleeping peacefully. Marcus sat beside her, feeling the rhythm of life around him without needing to impose control. For a fleeting moment, he felt the first whisper of contentment. It was not complete, not permanent, but it was a start.
Marcus woke again to the faint light seeping through the blinds, the same as every morning, yet something felt different. The hum of the city outside, the distant sirens, and the gentle breathing of his sleeping son reminded him of the life waiting beyond the pressures of work. He rubbed his eyes, feeling a tightness in his chest that hadn't been there a week ago. The promotion, the bonuses, the new luxury car, they had all brought fleeting pride, but not the satisfaction he had imagined. Instead, he carried a restless energy, a tension that grew heavier with each passing day. His mind raced before his body fully awakened, mapping out tasks, reviewing emails, and calculating how to outperform colleagues and peers. Breakfast was quiet. His wife, ever patient, prepared coffee and toast while glancing occasionally at Marcus, hoping for a sign that he might slow down, that he might notice the family around him. Their son babbled happily, completely unaware of the tension he often brought home from work. Marcus tried to smile, to engage, but the thought of the day's responsibilities hovered like a cloud. Even small tasks felt urgent. His calendar was a tightly packed map of meetings, deadlines, and client calls. Each moment seemed consumed by action, leaving little space for reflection or presence. Marcus had convinced himself that efficiency was the key to contentment, yet he couldn't shake the sense that something essential was missing. At work, the environment was a mirror of his internal state. Marcus noticed how colleagues vied for recognition, subtly comparing accomplishments, status, and material wealth. Social media fueled the competition further. The endless stream of promotions, exotic vacations, and luxury purchases created a constant pressure to do more, acquire more, and become more. Marcus's own sense of inadequacy, long suppressed, now bubbled near the surface. He had reached a high level of professional achievement, yet the comparison trap ensured that satisfaction remained elusive. He began noticing how often he measured his life against others instead of valuing his own progress and accomplishments. The weeks wore on, and small cracks widened. His sleep became fitful. Headaches and tight shoulders were regular companions. He found himself snapping at colleagues over minor oversights, and subtle tension crept into interactions with his wife and son. One evening, during dinner, his son dropped a fork and began to cry. Marcus, exhausted and distracted, reacted sharply, regretting the moment instantly. His wife's eyes held quiet disappointment. She did not scold him, but her expression conveyed a truth he had avoided. His relentless pursuit of more was harming the life he claimed to value most. Marcus swallowed the rising guilt, yet he felt powerless to slow the momentum. The habits of ambition and comparison had become deeply ingrained. A turning point arrived one afternoon when a client meeting went poorly. Marcus had prepared meticulously, anticipating every potential objection, yet the presentation failed to impress. He felt a familiar surge of frustration, tinged with disbelief. Months of effort and attention seemed undermined in a single meeting. Driving home that evening, the city lights blurred as rain streaked across the windshield. Marcus realized the absurdity. He had built his life around achievement, recognition, and comparison. Yet all it took was one imperfect outcome to feel the weight of inadequacy. The question he had begun asking weeks ago, "What is enough?" now pressed more urgently against his mind.
At home, he tried to reconnect with his family, but the effort felt awkward and stilted. His son wanted to play, but Marcus's mind drifted to unfinished reports. His wife attempted gentle conversation, but he responded in fragments. The distance between them felt tangible, a silent reminder that ambition had begun to exact a real cost. He lay awake that night, restless, replaying the day's events and imagining the next day's challenges. The city hummed outside the window, a backdrop to the relentless pursuit that had become his life. In these quiet moments, he began to see patterns. Work dominated his attention, comparison eroded satisfaction, and material accumulation provided only temporary relief. A subtle health scare followed. Tightness in his chest, irregular heartbeat, and fatigue forced Marcus to confront the physical cost of his lifestyle. The doctor's words were calm but firm. Rest, boundaries, and balance were essential. Marcus nodded, but the habits of ambition and comparison pulled him back before he could implement meaningful change. He returned to work the next day, carrying the dual awareness of fragility and necessity. Projects, clients, and colleagues demanded attention. Marcus tried to shift focus, attempting to limit unnecessary stress, but the culture of competition and the habits he had built resisted moderation. Even leisure offered no reprieve. Social gatherings became a stage for comparison rather than enjoyment. Friends discussed promotions, investments, and acquisitions with enthusiasm, and Marcus found himself silently tallying his own achievements against theirs. He knew, too, the subtle pride in others' eyes when they assumed his life mirrored his outward success. He knew, quietly, that the reality was different. The hollow ache remained. One morning, during a rare walk with his son in the park, Marcus paused on a bench and watched other fathers playing, laughing freely with their children. He noticed their attention was fully present, unbroken by emails or calls. The simplicity of their engagement struck him profoundly. His son tugged at his hand, eager to play, but Marcus hesitated, caught in the tension between presence and obligation. The realization was stark. He had missed countless small moments that could not be reclaimed. He began to see that no amount of money, material comfort, or professional recognition could replace these fleeting, vital experiences. Marcus's internal conflict deepened as he returned home. He wanted to slow down, to prioritize presence and connection, but he feared falling behind professionally. Every achievement seemed necessary, every deadline critical. The paradox of modern ambition weighed on him. To slow down was to risk loss. To accelerate was to risk life itself. Small crises mounted. A delayed project, a minor work conflict, a disagreement with his wife over household responsibilities. Each incident revealed the tenuous balance he maintained between external success and internal satisfaction. Marcus felt increasingly aware that his life was on a tightrope. One misstep could unravel the careful construction of achievement he had built. One evening, alone in his office after the family had gone to bed, Marcus reflected. He scrolled through photos on his phone. His son's birthday, holidays, family outings. He realized how often he had been physically present but mentally absent. He had been chasing recognition, status, and wealth while the moments that truly mattered quietly slipped by. He asked himself again, what is enough? This time, the question carried weight, urgency, and clarity. It was no longer a fleeting thought in the back of his mind. It was a pressing challenge, demanding answers. Marcus sensed that unless he redefined his pursuit of success, he would continue to sacrifice the life he valued most for illusions of achievement. At work the next day, Marcus tried something different. He focused on what he could control, his effort, his attention, his approach to communication. He let go of outcomes that were beyond his influence. The change was subtle but noticeable. He felt less reactive, more grounded, and surprisingly lighter. Returning home, he engaged fully with his son, reading a story and laughing without distraction. His wife noticed and smiled softly, a quiet acknowledgement of the small but meaningful change.
The weeks passed with a subtle rhythm of tension and partial awakening. Marcus continued to move through his days, balancing work obligations, family responsibilities, and the inner pressure that had never truly left him. Each morning brought the same sensations: chest tightness, racing thoughts, and the persistent question, what is enough? Even as he recognized the mounting costs of his ambition, habits were hard to break. He found himself oscillating between relentless pursuit and fleeting moments of presence. At work, colleagues noticed his growing focus on what he could control and his decreased fixation on outcomes. But they also sensed his persistent stress, the underlying tension that had never quite left him. Marcus's health became a daily reminder that change was necessary. He experienced recurring headaches, restless nights, and minor chest pains that forced him to pause. Initially, he brushed them off, attributing them to temporary stress. Yet the cumulative effect was undeniable. His body communicated what his mind had been slow to admit. The relentless chase of external markers had consequences beyond dissatisfaction. It threatened his vitality. Even small missteps felt amplified. Missing a bedtime story, snapping at his son over a spilled cup, or arriving home late to yet another missed dinner began to weigh heavily. Marcus felt guilt seep into moments he should have savored, the same moments he had long ignored in favor of emails, meetings, and performance metrics. One particular evening brought a confrontation he could no longer avoid. His wife, weary but firm, sat him down after putting their son to bed. Her voice was calm but direct. "Marcus, I see how hard you work, but I also see how absent you are. You're here physically, but I can't reach you. Your son notices, I notice, and I can't help but wonder if this is the life we wanted." Her words pierced through the fog of justification Marcus had built around himself. He wanted to respond defensively, to explain the pressures of his career and the stakes of ambition, but the honesty in her eyes left no room for argument. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly hear her. The confrontation catalyzed reflection. Marcus spent that night pacing in the living room, staring at the city skyline and considering the trajectory of his life. He asked himself, had he traded the irreplaceable moments of love, family, and presence for achievements that, while impressive, provided no lasting satisfaction? He remembered mornings in the park with his son, nights of quiet conversation with his wife, and fleeting glimpses of joy that seemed to vanish the moment he returned to work. Marcus realized that the pursuit of more, money, recognition, status, had blinded him to the value of what he already had. The next morning, he attempted a small experiment. He left work slightly earlier than usual, refusing to check emails or messages for the first time in months. When he arrived home, his son ran into his arms, giggling and hugging him tightly. Marcus felt a warmth he had almost forgotten, a reminder that presence could provide far more satisfaction than any bonus or promotion. Dinner that night was filled with conversation, not about work, not about comparison or achievement, but about the simple events of the day. His wife laughed freely, and Marcus found himself smiling without distraction. It was a subtle but profound shift. Moments of true connection were not purchased, scheduled, or earned. They were created through attention and choice.
At work, Marcus began to apply the same principle. He focused on what was within his control, his effort, his preparation, and his interactions with colleagues and clients. He let go of obsessing over outcomes beyond his influence. The results were mixed. Some projects succeeded, others faltered. But Marcus found a sense of calm he had not experienced in years. Satisfaction came not from triumph alone, but from knowing he had acted with integrity and presence. This period of deliberate focus was not without resistance. Old habits and societal pressures remained. Colleagues still competed, social media still amplified comparisons, and the lure of material upgrades remained enticing. Yet Marcus felt a growing clarity. Contentment could not be bought, inherited, or earned externally. It was cultivated internally. One weekend, he took a long walk in the park with his son, observing other families around him. Fathers played with children. Mothers laughed, and life unfolded in simple, joyful rhythms. Marcus noticed the contrast with his own past behavior, the way he had often been physically present, but mentally absent. He vowed, silently but firmly, to prioritize these small, fleeting moments. They were the currency of true wealth. He also began noticing his reactions to challenges differently. A work conflict that would have triggered frustration now prompted reflection. What can I control here? What can I influence? He learned to distinguish between energy spent on effort versus energy wasted on things beyond his control. The distinction, though subtle, transformed his approach to stress, decision-making, and interpersonal interactions. Marcus's wife noticed the change too. Their conversations became deeper, more honest. He listened more attentively, engaged more deliberately, and offered support without distraction. The tension in their relationship softened, replaced by a quiet understanding that small but consistent actions mattered far more than grand gestures or words. Their son thrived in response. Playtime became richer, bedtime stories lingered longer, and Marcus began to experience the subtle joy of watching his child grow with awareness rather than obligation. The realization was profound. Presence, attention, and love were forms of success no bonus or promotion could replicate. Marcus also began reevaluating his relationship with money and material possessions. He recognized that while his income provided security and comfort, the relentless pursuit of more had blinded him to what truly mattered. The new car, larger house, and high-end gadgets no longer held the same allure. Instead, he found satisfaction in simpler pleasures, a quiet dinner, an unhurried walk, or a shared laugh with family. Small crises continued to arise, as life inevitably demands, but Marcus faced them with a new perspective. Mistakes at work no longer defined his worth. Delays, setbacks, and conflicts were reframed as opportunities to exercise patience, focus on effort, and cultivate resilience. The dichotomy of control, what he could change versus what he could not, became a guiding principle, slowly embedded into daily life. By midweek, Marcus noticed subtle changes in his physical and emotional state. Sleep returned more easily, tension in his shoulders eased, and moments of anxiety were punctuated by mindfulness and reflection. The relief was not dramatic, but cumulative. Each choice to slow down, engage fully, and focus on controllable actions built resilience, satisfaction, and presence. He found himself smiling more spontaneously, laughing at small jokes, and noticing details in his surroundings he had long ignored. The patterns of sunlight on the pavement, the rhythm of his son's breathing, the quiet support in his wife's gaze. Life, he realized, was not a series of milestones to conquer, but a collection of moments to inhabit fully. Late one night, Marcus reflected on his journey so far. He had faced mounting stress, strained relationships, health warnings, and the persistent pull of comparison. Yet he had also discovered the first glimpses of freedom, the ability to focus on what he could control, to invest attention in what truly mattered, and to appreciate the sufficiency of what he already possessed. He understood that the path ahead would not be without challenges. Old habits, societal expectations, and internalized ambitions would continue to test him. But Marcus had begun the work of transformation, laying a foundation for sustained change, clarity, and connection.
Marcus woke to the sound of rain pattering gently against the window, a soft reminder that life moved forward whether he was ready or not. He had learned, slowly and painfully, that control was an illusion for many of life's outcomes, yet his habits of striving and comparison still tugged at him. Today, he resolved, would be different. At breakfast, he noticed the little things, the way his son's hair fell across his forehead,
the rhythm of his wife's laughter as she told a story, the warmth of the coffee steaming in his cup. These simple observations, previously drowned out by distraction, felt like a balm. He realized he had been so consumed by what he could not control, client opinions, social comparisons, material status, that he had neglected the small, beautiful realities already within his grasp. Work that morning brought its usual challenges: tight deadlines, demanding clients, and unanticipated complications. Marcus felt the familiar pulse of anxiety rise, but he reminded himself, focus on what you can control. Prepare thoroughly, communicate clearly, act with integrity, but release attachment to outcomes. This mantra, subtle but powerful, guided him through the day with a calm he had rarely experienced. Even colleagues noticed the change. Marcus was still driven, still ambitious, but no longer reactive. A client expressed frustration over a delayed timeline, and instead of internalizing the criticism or spiraling into stress, he listened, acknowledged their concerns, and calmly presented actionable solutions. The relief in his chest was immediate, a sensation of freedom he had almost forgotten existed. After work, he took his usual walk in the park with his son. Rain had ceased, leaving behind puddles that reflected the late afternoon sun. His son splashed gleefully, laughing as Marcus followed suit, boots soaked, sleeves damp, hearts light. It was a minor moment, almost trivial, but Marcus felt its significance deeply. Life, he realized, was composed of countless such moments. Missing them for the pursuit of abstract achievement had been the real cost. During the walk, he reflected on his wife. Her quiet support had been a constant, a tether anchoring him amidst the storm of ambition. He resolved to listen more, to act with presence, to engage without distraction. He realized that his relationships were not rewards for achievement, they were fundamental measures of success. Back home, dinner was serene. Marcus engaged fully, noticing the way his son's fingers fumbled with utensils, the subtle patience in his wife's eyes, the small joy of conversation unhurried and undistracted. This presence, he understood, was not granted, it was chosen. Every act of mindfulness, every moment invested in attention was a victory against the invisible chains of comparison and ambition. That night, as he lay beside his sleeping son, Marcus considered the weeks behind him. He had begun experimenting with deliberate focus, prioritizing presence over outcomes, attention over accumulation. The process was imperfect but meaningful. He realized that small, consistent choices could transform a life far more effectively than grand gestures or external milestones. The following week brought challenges. A project at work went awry due to factors beyond Marcus's control. A supplier delayed materials, a client changed expectations, and a colleague miscommunicated critical details. In the past, he would have felt rage, frustration, and guilt. Now, he paused. He assessed what was within his control, acted where he could influence outcomes, and released attachment to the rest. By the time he left the office, the tension that once defined him all day had softened. On the way home, he reflected on how much energy he had previously wasted on things outside his influence. The contrast was stark, and Marcus felt a surge of clarity. Focus, effort, and presence mattered infinitely more than the uncontrollable tides of circumstance.
At home, a minor conflict arose over household chores. Marcus's first instinct was to assert control, to correct perceived inefficiencies. Instead, he paused, considered what truly mattered, and chose a different approach: cooperation and understanding. The interaction, though simple, transformed into a moment of connection rather than contention. Marcus felt the subtle but profound impact of choosing presence and perspective over ego-driven control. Later, he journaled quietly, reflecting on the day. Writing was no longer about documenting achievements or failures, but about observing himself, understanding motivations, and recognizing patterns. Each entry reinforced the emerging principle. Contentment comes not from external acquisition, but from mastery of attention, effort, and mindset. One evening, Marcus witnessed a small act that struck him deeply. His son, struggling to stack blocks, became frustrated and began to cry. Instead of rushing to correct or solve the problem, Marcus guided gently, encouraging perseverance while observing without interference. The child's triumph, small yet genuine, was a revelation. Marcus understood that success, whether in work or life, was cultivated through patience, effort, and focus on controllable actions. This insight extended to his own life. Projects at work, family dynamics, and personal ambitions all contained elements beyond his influence. Yet within every challenge, Marcus saw opportunities to practice deliberate attention, integrity, and presence. He realized the paradox. Letting go of control over outcomes enhanced his ability to act effectively within his sphere of influence. As the week progressed, Marcus noticed changes in his emotional state. Anxiety no longer dominated mornings. Frustration was tempered by reflection. Joy became more accessible through simple, deliberate acts. He experienced satisfaction in his work not because of accolades, but because he had acted with diligence and awareness. Each day became a practice in focusing on the controllable and accepting the rest. Marcus also began to apply this principle to financial decisions. He reassessed priorities. Expenditures on luxury items no longer provided the same thrill, while investments in experiences and family moments felt richer. He noticed how small choices, an impromptu picnic, a shared meal, an evening walk, produced more enduring satisfaction than any material acquisition. The shift was subtle, almost imperceptible to outsiders, but profound internally. Marcus realized he had been chasing the wrong form of wealth. The currency of life, he now understood, was measured in attention, presence, and relational depth, rather than bank balances or status symbols. Conflict at work presented an opportunity for further growth. A client expressed dissatisfaction with a deliverable, voicing complaints in a way that would have previously triggered defensiveness. Marcus listened, acknowledged concerns, and proposed practical adjustments. He noticed a newfound calm in his response, a reflection of internal focus rather than a reaction to external pressures. This experience reinforced a central truth. Mastery of self, not control of outcomes, was the key to sustainable contentment. Marcus felt the first genuine satisfaction derived from practicing the principle, independent of external validation. At home, family moments flourished. Dinner conversations deepened, laughter flowed more freely, and Marcus's attention to his son became intentional rather than distracted. He observed the small, irreplaceable details, the way his son's eyes lit up, the rhythm of his wife's speech, the texture of ordinary moments. These observations, once trivial, became a source of profound satisfaction. Through these interactions, Marcus began to internalize a guiding principle. Life was composed of controllable elements, and attention invested in these moments yielded more meaningful returns than any external pursuit. Even social comparisons began to lose their grip. Marcus noticed colleagues boasting about promotions, vacations, and acquisitions. Whereas before he had felt envy and inadequacy, now he observed without judgment, appreciating achievements without attachment. He realized that comparing himself to others had only amplified dissatisfaction. Focusing on his own deliberate choices nurtured contentment.
Marcus woke before dawn, the city still quiet outside his window. The day held no pressing deadlines, yet his mind was alert. He had come a long way from the restless, comparison-driven man who had once felt trapped in the pursuit of more. Now he understood that the world's demands would never cease, and the temptation to chase endlessly would persist. But he also knew that mastery over attention, focus, and presence could create an internal sanctuary of calm and satisfaction. Breakfast was calm. His son chattered about toys and stories. His wife laughed quietly over coffee. Marcus noticed the details: the morning sunlight through the blinds, the warmth in his wife's expression, the small rhythm of the day unfolding. He responded fully, without distraction, savoring the ordinary magic that had previously gone unnoticed. Even small choices reinforced his transformation. Marcus consciously avoided checking emails before leaving for work, instead engaging in mindful reflection on what was truly important for the day. He recognized that his life's quality was determined less by outcomes than by presence, effort, and deliberate attention. At the office, challenges awaited, as always. A complex client issue emerged, requiring urgent coordination and problem-solving. Marcus felt the familiar pull of anxiety, but applied his evolving philosophy: focus on what he can control, act with diligence, and release attachment to the outcome. The process was not effortless. Old habits, perfectionism, overthinking, and comparison still surfaced. Yet each time Marcus noticed these impulses, he paused and realigned. Slowly, the pattern of response shifted. He reacted with clarity rather than compulsion, effort rather than obsession. The day progressed with a series of tests. Colleagues argued over project details, minor mistakes occurred, and the timeline grew tighter. In the past, Marcus would have felt tension mounting into stress and irritation. Now he observed calmly, intervening where he could, guiding where necessary, and accepting what lay beyond his control. The subtle but profound difference was unmistakable. He was no longer a prisoner of circumstance. Returning home, he found his wife in the kitchen preparing dinner, his son happily coloring at the table. Marcus joined them, fully engaged. He noticed the intricate details of his son's work, the way he held the crayon, the careful strokes of color, the proud smile at completion. He realized that these small, present moments were far more valuable than any accolade or purchase he had chased in the past. Dinner conversation flowed, laughter arose organically, and Marcus felt a quiet joy that had eluded him for years. He marveled at the contrast between this calm engagement and the constant tension of earlier life. The lesson was clear. Satisfaction was not external. It was cultivated internally through attention, presence, and deliberate choice. That evening, Marcus reflected on the journey so far. He wrote in his journal, not to record achievement, but to observe patterns, track growth, and reinforce lessons learned. He considered the mistakes he had made, the opportunities missed, and the costly obsession with comparison. Yet he also acknowledged the progress. He was present, attentive, and deliberate. He revisited the recurring question, what is enough? The answer had evolved. Enough was not measured by salary, status, or possessions. It was measured by presence, connection, effort, and awareness. These elements, he realized, were controllable, sustainable, and capable of generating genuine fulfillment.
The following week brought further tests of his resolve. A client expressed dissatisfaction with a deliverable. A colleague mishandled communication. A sudden change in project scope demanded rapid adaptation. In the past, Marcus would have felt stress, frustration, and self-recrimination. This time, he paused, assessed what he could influence, acted decisively within his control, and released the rest. The difference was transformative. Whereas stress had previously accumulated, leaving him drained and irritable, Marcus now experienced a grounded satisfaction. He had acted with integrity, focus, and effort. The outcome, whether favorable or not, did not dictate his internal state. At home, family life flourished in tandem with Marcus's internal growth. He engaged fully with his son during playtime, noticing the small, irreplaceable details, the laughter, the curiosity, the fleeting joy of discovery. With his wife, he shared deliberate conversations, listening fully, responding thoughtfully, and appreciating her patience and insight. These moments, though simple, underscored the principle that true wealth lay not in accumulation, but in attention. Marcus observed that every deliberate, present interaction reinforced his sense of sufficiency, contentment, and agency. A weekend brought an opportunity to reinforce these lessons further. Marcus took his son to the park, joined by neighbors and their families. He observed the interactions, noting the joy that arose from simple engagement, not from material reward or recognition. He guided his son gently, allowing exploration and problem-solving without interference. As he watched, he realized that his child's satisfaction mirrored his own. When Marcus allowed himself to focus fully on what he could control, his effort, attention, and presence, the world became less stressful, more joyful, and richer in meaning. In professional life, Marcus applied the same principles. He prioritized effort, communication, and deliberate action, while releasing fixation on uncontrollable outcomes. Meetings flowed more smoothly, projects progressed efficiently, and his own sense of clarity expanded. Colleagues noticed the change, not in ego or ambition, but in the calm, grounded presence that now guided interactions. Challenges persisted, yet Marcus met them with a new perspective. Small mistakes, delays, and setbacks were reframed as opportunities to practice resilience and focus. Where he once would have reacted with frustration, he now responded with deliberate attention, effort, and calm reflection. The dichotomy of control, the awareness of what he could change versus what lay beyond his influence, became his anchor. Marcus also began to share insights subtly with his wife, modeling calm presence and deliberate choice. Their conversations deepened, filled with shared reflection, mutual support, and gentle laughter. The bond strengthened, not through grand gestures, but through consistent attention, presence, and alignment of values. Even social comparisons lost their grip. Marcus observed peers' achievements and possessions without envy, recognizing that his own life had shifted in priority. Satisfaction no longer depended on relative success, but on deliberate investment in attention, connection, and presence. By midweek, Marcus noticed profound shifts in his internal state. Sleep was restorative, tension was manageable, and moments of anxiety were tempered by deliberate practice. Joy became accessible through small, mindful acts rather than external validation. He appreciated the ordinary details of life, the sunlight on leaves, the texture of his son's hair, the warmth of his wife's hand, recognizing them as the real markers of wealth and fulfillment. One evening, As Marcus reflected quietly in the living room, his wife joined him. They sat together, hand in hand, watching their son sleep peacefully in the next room. Marcus felt a profound gratitude, a recognition of the abundance present in attention, presence, and connection. The relentless chase for more, money, status, possessions, felt distant, almost absurd. He understood now that the true measure of life was not in accumulation, but in mindful engagement with what was already within reach. The lessons were hard-earned, but enduring, grounded in action, observation, and reflection.
Marcus woke before sunrise, the soft hum of the city rising gently beyond the window. The rhythm of his breath matched the quiet pulse of morning. He had learned to notice these small, seemingly ordinary details: the golden hue spilling across the bedroom, the gentle rustle of leaves outside, the way his son's little feet patted against the floor. Each observation anchored him, a subtle reminder that life's richness was measured in awareness rather than accumulation. Breakfast was calm and intentional. Marcus observed the way his wife poured coffee, the playful chatter of his son, and the warmth of sunlight on the kitchen table. He smiled freely, fully present, noticing sensations and emotions he had previously overlooked. This engagement, deliberate yet effortless, had become a new habit, one that brought quiet joy and deep satisfaction. At work, Marcus faced challenges as usual: shifting client demands, tight deadlines, and the occasional colleague friction. Yet he approached these situations differently. Where he once had reacted with urgency, stress, and overextension, he now paused. He focused on what he could influence, executed with diligence, and let go of outcomes beyond his control. This approach was transformative. Tasks were completed more effectively, communication flowed more smoothly, and the underlying tension that had long defined his workdays dissipated. Colleagues noticed the shift. Marcus remained ambitious, yet unreactive. He had learned to inhabit a space of calm focus, allowing his effort and presence to guide action, rather than allowing external pressures to dictate his emotional state. During lunch, Marcus stepped outside to the park near his office. The air was crisp, carrying the subtle scent of rain from the previous night. He observed people passing by, some hurried, some relaxed, and reflected on the variety of approaches to life. Many chased external markers of success. Some were content simply in their movements and interactions. Marcus recognized that he had once aligned with the former group, but now he actively cultivated the latter. A father nearby tossed a ball to his child, laughing freely. Marcus felt the pang of recognition. He had once missed countless moments like this, preoccupied by work and comparison. Now, he engaged with his own son similarly, allowing himself the freedom to participate fully and savor the interaction without distraction or calculation. Returning to the office, Marcus noticed subtle but profound changes in himself. Frustration no longer dominated minor inconveniences. A miscommunication with a client became an opportunity for dialogue and solution rather than anger or blame. Each interaction reinforced his understanding that focus on controllable actions rather than outcomes cultivated calm and effectiveness. Even social interactions changed. Colleagues would discuss promotions or acquisitions, but Marcus no longer compared. Instead, he observed, appreciated, and reflected quietly. The habitual stress of competition had loosened its grip. He realized that external validation, while sometimes pleasant, was neither essential nor permanent. True satisfaction arose from deliberate effort, mindful presence, and engagement in meaningful relationships.
At home, Marcus applied these principles consistently. Playtime with his son became a practice in attention and patience. Meals were shared fully, with conversation flowing naturally, laughter abundant, and small details noticed and appreciated. Even minor moments, reading a bedtime story, helping with puzzles, observing his child's curiosity, were experienced as deliberate acts of presence, rich with meaning. His relationship with his wife deepened further. Deliberate listening, engagement, and empathy became routine. They began discussing not only daily events, but long-term goals, fears, and values. Conversations that once felt rushed or transactional now carried depth, resonance, and mutual understanding. Marcus realized that these connections, nurtured with care and attention, were the true markers of life's wealth. The weekend brought a family outing to a local nature reserve. Marcus observed the gentle sway of trees, the rhythm of birdsong, and the joy radiating from his son as he explored streams and trails. He walked slowly, deliberately, noticing textures, sounds, and patterns that had previously gone unnoticed. His wife and son matched his pace, and together they moved in a shared rhythm, present to the experience rather than preoccupied with schedules or digital distractions. In this environment, Marcus reflected on his journey. The relentless pursuit of money, status, and possessions had once dominated him. Now he measured success differently, through presence, attention, and connection. The simple act of walking with his family, engaging fully, and appreciating what was within reach became a profound demonstration of enough. Back home, Marcus implemented small but consistent practices to reinforce his transformation. He began journaling daily, not to document achievements, but to observe himself, reflect on actions, and consolidate lessons. Meditation, brief moments of mindfulness, and conscious engagement in routine activities became tools to anchor attention and cultivate awareness. Even professional decisions reflected this shift. Marcus now approached negotiations and planning with clarity, prioritizing effort and influence over outcome obsession. Deadlines and client expectations were addressed with calm efficiency, reducing stress while enhancing effectiveness. The dichotomy of control, the separation of what could and could not be influenced, was now a living principle guiding daily actions. Over the following weeks, Marcus noticed the subtle ripple effects of his new approach. His colleagues, initially curious about his calm demeanor, began to adapt their own approaches. His son thrived, engaged fully in play, learning, and family interaction. His wife expressed gratitude for his presence and attentiveness. Each small change reinforced the larger realization. The pursuit of more had once obscured life's richness, but deliberate focus, presence, and connection restored it. Marcus also reassessed his relationship with money. While financial stability remained important, the obsession with accumulation had diminished. Purchases were deliberate, intended for experience or utility, not status or comparison. Investments in family outings, meaningful experiences, and personal growth took precedence. Satisfaction was derived not from external markers, but from internal alignment with values and priorities. At work, challenges persisted. A project required coordination across multiple teams with differing priorities. Marcus encountered miscommunication, delays, and conflicting expectations. Instead of succumbing to stress, he applied his guiding principle: focus on controllable actions, exert effort, and release attachment to results. The day concluded with progress achieved and tension minimized, a stark contrast to his previous reactive, stress-laden approach. This professional success, subtle yet significant, reinforced Marcus's evolving understanding. True accomplishment arises from deliberate effort and attention, not the illusion of control over outcomes. Even small, routine moments became lessons in presence. Morning coffee, family breakfast, walks to the park,
bedtime stories. Each acted as a microcosm of deliberate choice, attention, and mindfulness. Marcus realized that the accumulation of such moments, consistently practiced, created a sustainable foundation for satisfaction and well-being.
The city woke slowly, filtered light spilling across Marcus's apartment. He stood at the window, sipping coffee, observing the rhythm of life beyond the glass. Cars moved steadily, people hurried to work, and the pulse of urban life carried on without pause. Marcus felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. He no longer measured his worth against the currents outside him. He measured it by the deliberate choices he made within his sphere of influence. At breakfast, his son tugged at his sleeve, asking for help with a puzzle. Marcus crouched down, engaged fully, noticing every detail, the way his son's small fingers grasped the pieces, the concentration in his gaze, the delighted squeals of success. His wife smiled quietly, observing Marcus's attention. For the first time in years, they shared a morning of calm, presence, and connection. The realization struck Marcus with gentle clarity. The pursuit of external measures of success had once kept him from this richness, and now he was truly awake to it. The workday presented its usual challenges: unexpected deadlines, client disagreements, and operational issues. Marcus approached each with the same steady principle: focus on what he could control, invest effort fully, and release attachment to outcomes beyond influence. A particularly stressful client call arose. In the past, Marcus would have felt irritation, defensiveness, and anxiety. This time, he listened fully, acknowledged concerns, proposed actionable steps, and let go of the rest. The sense of calm that followed was remarkable, proof of the principle he had been cultivating. Returning home, Marcus embraced the evening family routine. Together, they prepared dinner, ate, laughed, and shared stories. His son's curiosity sparked questions and laughter. Marcus responded fully, no longer distracted by lingering stress or comparison. The household, once tense and hurried, felt aligned, balanced, and present. Marcus noticed the transformation, not only in himself, but in the family's dynamic. Presence begets presence, he reflected quietly. During a weekend, Marcus took his son on their usual nature walk, the sun bright on their backs, leaves crunching underfoot. As they explored, a man jogging past exchanged a friendly nod. Marcus noticed him again the following morning during his walk, sharing the same route. Over time, small greetings turned into brief conversations, and eventually, a meaningful friendship began to form. This man was accomplished, kind, and grounded, a reflection of Marcus's evolving world. He shared values of presence, deliberate choice, and focus on what could be controlled. Marcus realized that by aligning with these principles, not only had his internal life changed, but the people around him began to mirror this new equilibrium. At work, Marcus applied these principles in larger-scale decisions. He managed teams with patience, acknowledged contributions, and avoided micromanaging outcomes. Colleagues responded with respect and engagement. Successes were now shared, celebrated, and appreciated, not for status, but for collective effort and presence. Failures, too, were approached with reflection, learning, and calm action. The contrast with past habits was striking. Family moments continued to flourish. Dinner conversations explored emotions, curiosity, and daily experiences rather than status, income, or comparison. Marcus and his wife discussed values and goals, planning thoughtfully for the future while fully inhabiting the present. These conversations, consistent and deliberate, strengthened bonds and cultivated a deep, enduring sense of partnership.
Marcus also practiced self-reflection daily. Journaling, meditation, and quiet observation became part of the routine, anchoring him in the principle of focusing on controllable actions and appreciating what was already within his reach. He noted emotional triggers, patterns of thought, and subtle tendencies toward old habits. Each reflection reinforced mastery over reaction and alignment with presence. Through these practices, Marcus observed subtle but meaningful changes. Stress no longer dominated mornings or evenings. Work challenges were approached calmly and effectively. Family engagement felt abundant and fulfilling. Small pleasures, sunlight on leaves, a child's laughter, a shared meal, became central markers of richness and success. He realized that enough was not a fixed quantity, but a cultivated mindset continuously reinforced through presence, attention, and deliberate choice. One evening, Marcus and his wife discussed an upcoming milestone, their son's 3rd birthday. They planned a modest celebration, focused not on extravagance, but on meaningful experiences, shared joy, and presence. Marcus recognized that previous years would have been consumed by performance, expense, and comparison. Now the focus was on what truly mattered: connection, attention, and intentional presence. The celebration arrived, simple yet profound. Friends and family gathered, laughter echoed, and Marcus felt genuine satisfaction, not from recognition or status, but from presence, shared joy, and deliberate engagement. His son's excitement and delight were mirrors of the value he had been cultivating daily. Marcus reflected on the path that had brought him here. The relentless pursuit of more, the comparison with peers, the stress and tension. It had once dominated his life. But through small, consistent choices, reflection, and practice, he had begun to experience sufficiency. He understood now that external markers, wealth, status, possessions, were transient and often misleading. Internal mastery, presence, and alignment with values were enduring. The morning walks continued to play a profound role in Marcus's life. His friendship with the accomplished man evolved into a supportive partnership, exchanging reflections, experiences, and encouragement. These interactions reinforced Marcus's understanding. By focusing on what could be controlled, effort, attention, and presence, he not only transformed his life, but attracted relationships aligned with his values and priorities. Professional life had also shifted. Projects were approached with clarity, teamwork was emphasized over individual recognition, and Marcus felt genuine fulfillment in contributions and results, independent of external accolades. He noticed that success, when reframed through effort and presence, was more satisfying, sustainable, and meaningful. The dichotomy of control, the realization that he could manage effort, attention, and attitude, but not external outcomes, had become a living principle. Life's unpredictability no longer triggered fear or obsession. It became a canvas for deliberate engagement and reflection. At home, the family flourished. Relationships deepened, laughter became frequent, and connection was nurtured through consistent attention and presence. Marcus's wife expressed gratitude for his engagement and support,
and their son thrived in an environment rich with presence, patience, and love. Each day became an exercise in sufficiency, reinforcing the enduring value of mindful, deliberate choices.
If you stayed this long, take a moment to reflect. Where is your focus today? What can you control? And what is simply outside your influence? Share in the comments where you're listening from. We'd love to hear. If you found Marcus's journey inspiring, subscribe for more stories exploring life, presence, and inner growth. Like this video to support more meditative narratives, and listen to another story to continue exploring the path to clarity, sufficiency, and fulfillment.